but as black people in this nation, we need to get clarity, okay? And we need to see what's really going on, what we're supposed to be, because we don't have any other country. See, we're very unique. We're not like Africans who stayed in Africa, okay? We're not like Africans who went anywhere. We are the Africans in America, most of us the descendants of slaves, okay? And so we have a very unique position in this nation. We fought in every war that this nation put its hand to do. We fought and died in the Revolutionary War. We fought and died in the Indian Wars. We fought and died in the Civil War. We fought and died in the Spanish-American War. We fought and died in World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, Iraq, Iran, Afghanistan, and everywhere else. And what's interesting is, it's just that's just the truth. And so then it's very difficult when we see the injustices in our nation done under the stars and stripes, and then have folks chastising black folks for protesting what's happening in this nation, okay? What I find very, very interesting is even my upbringing. Okay, I was born into a military family. I was born in Los Angeles. After Los Angeles, we left Los Angeles as a toddler and moved to Europe. Lived there for 4.5 years. My dad was in the military, and after Europe, came back and moved to Bangor, Maine. Then moved to Kansas, Junction City, Kansas, Fort Riley, while my father was in Vietnam. And then when he got back to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Ohio, which was his final assignment. But what I didn't realize until later in life, and not having a chance to discuss this with my father, I can't confirm this. But what I have noticed is that he kept us outside of the reach of civil unrest within this nation, of persecution of black people in this nation. Okay? So during the 60s then, we lived in Europe for almost 5 years. Okay? And then after that, we were at stateside bases and never really venturing off of the bases. And my father was an E9, a Chief Master Sergeant, which is the highest rank that can be achieved in the enlisted realm. Whatever the service is, he was an E9. Actually, my sister retired as an E9 too. She surpassed all 4 of her older brothers as far as rank goes. But so even as an E9 on the base, I'm sure that kept us from having to experience any racial negativities wherever we lived, because we were the children of the Chief Master Sergeant, okay? And so we basically avoided any kind of negativity having to do with the color of our skin. Okay? Now in retrospect, again, I do realize I was mistreated by some of my elementary school teachers, coming up, white teachers, very harshly, and differentiating the treatment to me than my white peers who were doing the same things I was doing. But I didn't understand it then, that it had to do with my skin color. So it still was never an issue to me. I remember I was in Junction City, Kansas, though, and my father was in Vietnam. First time I was called a nigger. I was playing with some kids, I think I was about 8 or 9 or something years old. We were all playing together. I was the only black kid, but I didn't realize I was black or they were white or we were different. We were just a bunch of kids playing, and this kid called me that. It didn't even faze me because I had never heard the word before. That was that. So I really didn't get a chance to experience that stuff. But as an older person in the 70s now, I was in high school on the heels of the Black Power movement, and with the afros and the fist and Black Power and Black Panther. I mean, we were all black. And by that time, the reality of the societal issues was prevalent and relevant in my life. But at that time, black folks were strong. And the rest of our society was afraid of us. So even where I went to school in Ohio, Stebbins, that we were about 10% of us were black. Most of us were military kids. None of us had any issues because some of us were tough. I'm not saying me, but some of our, because we were unified. It didn't matter if you were a square. It didn't matter it didn't matter what you were. You were black. We were together. We were unified. Nobody messed with you because they didn't want to deal with someone else. I remember at my 5-year reunion, one of the white varsity football players, I was going to the bar to get a drink, and he was with his buddies, still wearing his high school jacket, like Al Bundy, I guess, right? And he was like half drunk and said, if you weren't with your buddy over there, I'd fight you. And I'm like, your point? They didn't understand the unity that we had as black people. Of course, I didn't have any issues because I was with my friend. And that's because there was a unity among black folks that these guys just couldn't understand. They couldn't fathom, okay? And so that was the reality. So that's why I'm a different kind of black person today. And you probably noticed that with some of my heroes growing up. Martin Luther King was not he was like on the lowest point on my list. He wasn't even on my list, because he would just take a punch. My heroes were Huey P. Newton, were Angela Davis, were Eldridge Cleaver, were Kathleen Cleaver, were Bobby Seale, George Jackson, Angela Davis, okay? These were my heroes. And so I was a different kind of black person because of the time that I came up in, okay? And this is carried over into now throughout my life. I've never really taken any guff or any mess, any racial mess. It just haven't. I was always armed. Even from the 8th grade on up, I always carried a knife. I was just not going to be victimized, okay? And that is simply the way, I had to cash my I still carry a knife, I guess. Out of habit. I always have one. But I also have a 9mm AR shot. I mean, I am not the victim, okay? And for real. Because I'm too old to run, and I'm too old to fight. So you always have to protect yourself. Do not be the victim. That's the issue that I have even with black people today. In this nation that we live in, and this is what we're going to talk about, is we have unreasonable expectations given the history. Now the problem, we've heard over the years that old saying, the purpose of history is so that we don't repeat past mistakes. But the problem we've had in this nation is we haven't been fed proper history. We don't even know our history. So how can we avoid the mistakes of the past if we don't know our true history? And this is for black folks and white folks, because we were raised in the same schools with the same history. And some of the history sort of gave a positive view of certain historical white people that were not true, but that view did not hurt the white students. It did in the sense that it created for them an ignorance, but we remained in the same ignorance. And when you feed a people and oppress people a particular ignorance, which seems to uplift their oppressors, it doesn't help them at all, okay? I remember I was talking to some folks, white folks and black folks, about the Alamo in Texas, about how that was a criminal outfit, and that Davy Crockett and Jim Boy and Sam Houston, they were criminals or something. They were just like an organized crime unit trying to perpetuate criminal activity, and the authorities were coming down on them, which were the Mexicans. These slaves were running away to Mexico. See, I was talking even a black man recently. Let's just talk for a while. And we were looking, there are a lot of black people. I think we all have recognized recently there are a lot of black Mexicans. Okay, coming up, one of my best friends I used to work out with, he was Mexican, but his hair was always kind of, a little bit questionable. Not like the Mexicans you see on TV. Only to find out later how many black Mexicans there are. And how they having children, within the indigenous communities and all that many of the Mexicans you see have mixed blood, and this guy in particular. To even where, last time I saw him at a high school reunion, he had cut all his hair off. You know why? You know, a lot of times people cut their hair off because they have a receding hairline. No, not him, but he wasn't trying to deal with that nappy hair, okay? So I'm saying there's a lot of black folks in Mexico, but just let me be clear. I was speaking to a black man. He was talking about, you know, because the Mexicans had so many slaves, you know, in Mexico, more slaves than they had in the United States. I don't know if that's true, but what I do know, in 1837, they outlawed slavery. They outlawed slavery. And slaves would run away. You know who outlawed slavery? Okay, they outlawed slavery in 1837. And so you had runaway slaves running to Mexico. And so you had these guys, these white guys, coming across nation, coming down there trying to capture these slaves. In the Alamo, they were trying to start cotton picking a slave plantation out of the Alamo. And the Mexicans weren't having it because they had outlawed slavery. And that's what Santa Anna, the general of the Mexicans were the heroes in that whole Alamo thing. The Alamo was a criminal organization, and they never taught us that in high school or in junior high school. Remember the Alamo and all these heroes, these brave heroes who fought off the Mexicans. No, they were criminals. The Alamo was a criminal organization, no different than organized crime, okay? And so that's an example. So how often, so what message then? Well, I mean, you're learning from the Alamo from probably like elementary school through junior high school through high school about these strong, brave, you know, white men defending the Alamo against these evil Mexicans. So then you consider of how many times those stories were drummed into our minds. What impression are you having of white folks, and what impression are you having of Mexicans? Think about it, for real. This is no time to defend a position or to be offensive or whatever. Let's just talk about this. What do you think the messages sent to young minds all the way up through every year that they're cognizant in school about white folks and Mexicans, just with the story of the Alamo? Convoluted. Totally false. Man, I was a guy, you know, raised as a young person in a military family. I love the military, the war movies. I love the westerns and all that stuff, the Randolph Scotts, the Errol Flynns, Tyrone Powers, you know, all these guys by Jimmy Stewart and Gary Cooper and all these guys were my heroes. Only to recognize later in life that the real West, a third of the cowboys were black. The Lone Ranger was actually a black guy. I mean, come on, man. See, we don't see that. And the war pictures, they don't show any blacks. They're always, and if you see blacks, they're simply in subservient positions. Really? Only later in life did we find out really about the black fighting units that took tremendous casualties, that saved the day often. Now in retrospect, why would we think that they would that they would only put black people in subservient positions in World War II, where we know black people fought in World War I, we know black people fought in the Spanish-American War, we know black people fought in every war this nation has ever had, but in World War II, no black people. Look, man, as a mailman in Dayton, I would love to talk to these old folks. I ran into this old guy once, right off of Germantown, and he was a cool old guy. He probably, I don't know, 80s or so. I don't know how old he was. But we were talking one day, and he was talking about the military, because I'd always say, you know, I'm a veteran, and he was in World War II. He said he volunteered when he was a young teenager. And he was telling me, he said, you know, when you see those black and white newsreel footages that they would film of the soldiers during World War II, he said, you know why you don't see any black people? He said, because whenever it would come to, because we were right there with them, he said they wouldn't film us. And as he was telling me the story, he began weeping. He wasn't just a tear. This man began weeping. He had been hurt so bad because he was right there, shoulder to shoulder with these white folks, but the news media would not film the black soldiers because they were sending all that footage back to the States. And they didn't want, in the United States that was still lynching people, that was still segregating people, that was still harsh to black people, murdering black people, imprisoning black people, doing all the things, heinous atrocities to black people, while black people were overseas fighting tyranny. There was tyranny at home. And so I talked to all kinds of other soldiers and sailors and military people that fought in World War II. Trust me, their personal stories are a lot different than the way it's been spun to us, okay? And so we want to talk about today and and the point is, with all those movies I used to love watching, it's very difficult for me to watch those movies now. Like, I was watching a Western last night, came on with Randolph Scott, one of my favorite, actors and all. And I finished, even the way they did the Indians, had him in there fighting hand-to-hand combat with the Indian and beating him. He would have been gutted if he had really fought. It wasn't even an Indian, it was a white guy with a black wig on. I mean, come on. Okay, it's just, so we're going to talk today about how we deal with this situation in America, still be good Americans, still be prosperous, still do well in the face of all this mess that we're looking at, okay? And what I'm saying is, first thing, we got to wise up. We got to crack open those history books. Recognize what was really going on in America. Recognizing the role of the black man in America, even despite all of the treachery, evil, mistreatment, all that's unfair stuff, that we're still here. And, if the situation had been reversed, and black people had been running things harshly, and white folks were in the position of black folks, there probably wouldn't be any white folks. Because we survived. We're strong. We're strong like that. So when you look at black folks that might be in neighborhoods acting crazy, doing crazy stuff, and you're ragging on them, why can't they take advantage of ragging on them like that? I'm saying these are survivors. You wouldn't have survived. The entire would have been wiped off the planet of the earth. It wouldn't have survived. But because of the strength of black people, we were able to survive. Now you can't go into a tremendous conflict and not have the weaponry, not have the ability to fight back and still survive and think you're going to come back without wounds. And so what we see today with the black people in this nation, the ones that are suffering or maybe not be doing things quite right or whatever, these are still the descendants, and the descendants, those that survived with a generational type of PTSD. And so you don't tell a GI coming back from combat that has experienced treachery and heinous, witnessed heinous things, why are you acting funny? Because he's got PTSD. And then you give him treatment, you give him drugs, you help him, you counsel him to get him, and you set him up, give him, free college, give him computers, set him up, help him be successful in life. But black folks in this nation have a generational PTSD that has never been well. You're talking about murders of parents, of generations of parents and brothers and sisters and aunts, and treacheries and rapes of males and females, and just the most lynchings and jailings and executions of innocents, and just all the negativities and mistreatment even to today, where you're still hearing a lot of politicians and a lot of people in the neighborhoods, say a lot of negativities and things about black folks. After all, you're talking about generational PTSD that is far more heinous than any service member in our nation's history has ever experienced, and it had never been dealt with. So of course people are going to be acting funny. But the interesting thing is we're still here. What do we do now? How are we going to survive? How are we going to prosper and be well? Now, this is very frustrating for me at times because I have the answer, because I've lived the answer. Now, I do want to suggest that I have to give kudos to my father, because he took us out of the fray, out of the mix, out of a situation where a lot of black people were being lynched, were being killed, were being mistreated, were being Jim Crowed, were being relegated to living environments and conditions that weren't conducive to grooming intellect or success. My father was born in the Bronx, New York. We'd go back there every year and find that his friends were either dead, strung out on drugs, in prison, or, had escaped. And for his family, I don't know who the influence was, but all his siblings, they basically joined the military. One of my uncles was in the Army. Another uncle was in the Navy. My father was in the Army initially, World War II, then Army Air Corps, then the Air Force for Korea. Then he volunteered, went to Vietnam. I mean, he was a lifer. And my aunt, she was an Army nurse, later became a nurse. So they got out. They found a way to get out. Get out of that dismal environment, a dismal situation that really had no future. So my father's family were wise and realized that they had to leave, and they left. Okay, and realizing that environment, I'm sure, is why my father kept us out of the fray. Kept us either overseas or on military bases. We hardly ever ventured out. Even when we came to Ohio, we never ventured out. Everything that we had to do was on base. Maybe a blue moon, we'd go out to the Salem Mall or something. But basically, we would have, every Sunday we'd have dinner at the base, at the NCO club. And we'd be home and school and church. But we wouldn't venture out. So we experienced none of that. The only venturing out we had was when we were in school. And again, that's where some of those elementary school white teachers were able to take out some of their frustration on this black kid who had no clue what was going on. Okay? So the question is, what do we do today? How do we survive? Now you look at Martin Luther King, there are a lot of black folks, well, we just eat at the lunch counter. Come on now. You got to learn something by now. Look, there's an old saying. There's an old saying about a frog and a scorpion. And so there was this pond, and there was a scorpion. This scorpion needed to get to the other side of the pond. But scorpions can't swim. So the scorpion went to the frog and said, Mr. Frog, will you do me a favor, please, and let me ride on your back and you swim across, take me to the other side of this pond? And the frog said, no, I'm not going to do that. Because if I'm riding you in the middle of this pond, you're going to sting me because you're a scorpion. And then I'm going to get paralyzed, I'm going to sink, and I'm going to die. And the scorpion said, I'm not going to sting you. He said, because if I sting you, and then you get paralyzed, you sink, you die, I'm going to die too because I can't swim. So the frog thought about that for a while. He said, yeah, that does make sense. If he kills me, he's going to die. So the frog said, get up on my back. So the scorpion climbed on the frog's back, and the frog began swimming across the pond. And when the frog got halfway across the pond, the scorpion stung him. And it surprised the frog, and as the frog is beginning to lose his mobility, he looks up and says, Scorpion, why did you sting me? Now you're going to die too. And the scorpion said, I couldn't help it. I'm a scorpion. Now, as that pertains to the situation that we're living in today, quit looking for the scorpion to give you a break. I don't care whether it's in politics, who is the president, or who is in charge of the city and the goings-on in the cities, or even who's in the classrooms teaching the classes. Don't look for a scorpion not to sting you. And see, this is where history comes in. We don't follow history. We don't know history, or we kind of have an idea, but we need to have a refresher course. Man, when I was a young kid coming up, even as a young teenager, influenced by the Black Power movement, I would be looking at all those civil rights photos, looking at what they did to black people. All the pictures that we see today, I've seen them all. All the things that are popping up on Facebook, the black and white photos, a lot of things that have happened, of the dogs being sick on that boy, the guy tied to a tree and burned to death, or all the different photos that we see now that pop up and just inflame us so much. I've seen all those pictures in books coming up. I was an angry young black person. Raised in religion to love all people, but very cognizant of the reality of the world and hating half of our society. More than half of our society. And it's conflicting. And you want to find more conflicting, what do you think the young people today are? My daughter was 3 years old when Obama was running for president. So she was not really cognizant, although she liked Obama. But even when she became cognizant of the reality of the world, maybe 6 or 7 years old, she's seeing how these people are treating this black man, this black president, who is obviously a good man. Till she's 12 years old. And then we have a new president in office who has a harsh rhetoric toward black people, and all these folks that are waving their Confederate flags and flags. This stuff doesn't faze me. I came up in the heels of the Black Power movement. They don't scare me. But what influence is it having on these young people who've all they've known, like my child, who just knew Obama from being 3 years old to 12 years old, and the next administration from 12 to 16 years old? All she's seen are these crazy people that have a harsh rhetoric and attitude toward black people. What do you think is in the heart of those young black people? Okay. Because they have a more clear view of the reality of what's going on than we did. Because to us, the history was hidden. But to our children today, the history was still there and revealed when given the right opportunity. The sheets were pulled off, okay? Let me tell you a little bit of history about our nation, which you probably didn't know. Now, we know about all the heinous goings on in our nation for black people from the time we were emancipated in 1864. See, then we have this Juneteenth celebration now, right? We got a federal holiday out of it. Well, guess what? I'm not a fan of Juneteenth. Why would I be? The slaves were freed in 1864, and they were still being lynched. Black people were still being lynched. They would have these things called vagrancy laws. So you're a black person now that's been freed, and you're in a city. The law is that if you didn't have a job and you're in that city, they could arrest you and throw you in prison. So the owners of these white establishments would not hire black people, call the police would come in and arrest them for vagrancy laws, throw them in prison. Now you got chain gangs. Then what the prisons would do, they would rent these prisoners out to the plantations. So now you had these prisoners, these black prisoners who were freed, but because they couldn't get jobs, they were thrown in prison. Now they were just given right back to the plantations as prison labor. And they were treated worse than the slaves were because slaves were expensive to plantation owners. So they had a vested interest in at least keeping the slaves healthy enough and alive. Because if you would lose a slave, you would lose a valuable piece of equipment. That would be a financial loss. But now when you have prisons being loaned to you, black prisoners being loaned to you, you didn't have to feed them, you didn't have to treat them right. Most of those black prisoners died on those plantations because the plantation owners had no vested interest or need to keep them healthy or to keep them alive, because that black person died. That was no financial loss to the plantation owner. So then you're still being lynched. Then you find some black people that were finding a way to become successful. The townspeople would get ticked off, come in there, take their stuff, burn them out, lynch them, run them out of town. You had towns where black people could become successful because people are gifted, become successful in business, growing this, growing that. Black people, they'd come in, kill them, throw them in prison, take their land. This was common practice. So now you want to tell me Juneteenth, when these other people found out they were really free, well, what is free? So I'm no fan of Juneteenth because 1864 emancipation didn't free the misery and treachery that was heinous treatment that was happening in the lives of black people even after emancipation. So what is Juneteenth to me? Oh, so now you free? Like these guys? Come on now. So we have a different perspective, okay? So comprehend that. But we do know, we have now Martin Luther King comes on the scene in 1960 something, right? Early 1960s, 1950s actually, mid to late 1950s. That's 100 years after emancipation, where they're still lynching black people, still killing black people, still segregation, not letting them even drink out of the same water fountains, eat in the same restaurants. My dad was telling me a story. I think he was like a master sergeant or something, and he had some troops that he was taking to a military base in Alabama, taking a bus. And they were going, so the troop, now by this time the military had desegregated. And so my father, with the rank that he had, he was over these, he went into the Air Force as a master sergeant, okay? That was a whole other story. He was a warrant officer in the Army, but anyway, that's another story. So he entered the Air Force as a master sergeant. And so he was taking these white troops to some base in Alabama at night, passing through a city, and they needed to eat. Came to the restaurant owner said, your men can eat here, but you can't. Because the men that he outranked, that he was in charge of, were white. They were going to allow them to eat in the restaurant, but my father couldn't. And my father was in charge. You know, my father jokingly laughed every time he told this story. He said, well, nobody ate that night. But still, even that was funny, because he was in charge. If I can't eat there, nobody's eating. That's that. But the reality is, so 100 years after emancipation, this mess is still going on. So what's the celebration of Juneteenth? Okay? And so even when I see the elections, even now, okay, and I vote. But the reality, I just vote on, who I think is the best person for it. But don't be fooled into thinking, black folks, you really have a hand in this. because until there is total equality, and I don't mean total equality for each person. I was telling this brother once, and he said, well, there can never be total equality for everybody. I don't mean for every individual person. I understand in each group of people there are going to be people that are not well, people that are well. But I'm saying as a group of people, our group cannot be treated any worse than another group. That's what equality is. So when Obama was running, I saw a black man that out-intellectualized anyone that he sat down to debate with. To me, that man needed to be president. If he was a Republican, I would have voted for him. It wasn't about politics. It was about a black man that was intelligent and a good man becoming leader of this nation. And so then when I saw the situation with then between Hillary and Trump, I just saw two rich white folks that wanted to be in charge. So Hillary may have had some of the ideologies, that are beneficial to black folks, but still the situation that we had in this nation really hasn't changed. You remember when Obama was going for the primary vote against Hillary, and she was saying, he's unelectable. In other words, she was saying he's a black guy. And Bill Clinton was saying, and there was another time he would have been fetching me some lemonade. What was he trying to say? And at the same time, when Obama won the Democratic primary, defeating Hillary, how many white Democrats all of a sudden became Republicans? Did their ideology change? I don't think so. So to me, neither party or any of the parties really impressed me, because until there is true equality, they really don't represent me anyway. Okay, and so we've seen this. We've seen what's going on in this nation. We just have to be wise. If we want to be well, we have to see clearly. Okay, and so that's what I'm trying to give you some clarity right now. I love this country. I love America. I'm a veteran. I am prosperous and successful in this nation, and I'm trying to share this is what we can be. But we just need some clarity about what's been going on. We need to understand what really happened historically, who the scorpion is and who the frog is, and is the scorpion ever going to change, and how do we be well if the scorpion doesn't change. I think if that frog hadn't let that scorpion jump up on his back, that frog would still be alive right now, okay? That's what I'm talking about. So let's talk about America. So we already know the domestic part. You know, I might have filled in some things that we weren't aware of, but we know how jacked up it's been, even up until recently. You know, we're all celebrating because Ahmaud Arbery's killers were brought to justice, but come on, man. If there hadn't been a video, you would have the prosecutor trying to trying to suppress the evidence now. It just happened that it all came out. Even when you had the situation, what was that brother's name? Rodney King. Remember, if that one guy just hadn't happened to have been filming that night, it would have just been business as usual. Just another black man was beat half senseless. There's nothing new in this nation. And you might have 1% justice. You know, and let's just be clapping about it. Let's not lose sight of all that other stuff that's been going on and hasn't subsided. That only when you get nationwide attention do folks have to act right. And that guy Kyle, what's his name, Kyle Rittenhouse, who got away with shooting those guys at that protest. Well, the guys he shot were white guys. So to me then, I could be wrong, but to me then, the court system realized that they didn't have to convict Kyle to avoid worldwide condemnation because he didn't kill a black man. He didn't kill 2 black men and wound another black man. He just killed 2 white guys and wounded a white guy. You see? So you have to look at these situations carefully. That if Kyle had as much attention on him after killing 2 black guys as he had for killing those 2 white guys, he'd be in prison right now. So it's kind of complicated. But we have to see what's going on here. What I'm suggesting is that things are not really on the way to getting better. But we can be better. We have to understand what's been going on. So from a historical perspective, we pretty much know how it's been in this nation. I've just reiterated, just to make us clear, how messed up things have been since the slaves were emancipated, that it got worse just by another name, okay? So what's been going on overseas in our nation? Okay. So this is, you know, our nation really hasn't been about all that much good, okay? We want to tout, you know, how great our military is, and it is great. I'm part of that military. All of my siblings are military. My dad was military. My family's done 100 years of service. Just my 4 siblings, myself, and my dad, total. But to be clear, the last war we won, America won, well, 2, World War II and Grenada. Okay, let's just be real, okay? So we've been involved in a lot of conflicts. We've been involved in Vietnam. We've been involved in Korea. We've been involved in Iraq, Iran, Afghanistan. We've been involved in a lot of conflicts. I mean, legitimately seen conflicts. But we haven't won. Now, what's interesting is that we have overthrown quite a few governments, okay? And this is kind of what I want to focus on for a moment. Since around the time of emancipation, a little after, we have overthrown nations like Hawaii. Come on, man. Hawaii. Let's see. Philippines, Chile, Honduras, Guatemala, Nicaragua, Cuba, Puerto Rico. I think I said the Philippines. We've Iraq, Iran. We've had our hand in the mix in so many weak nations for the purpose of economic gain. I mean, like Hawaii, for example. They had their own government. And I guess the first problem was they allowed missionaries, you know. And they began to see how beautiful this land was, how abundant its potential. And the United States government overthrew the Hawaiian government and installed their own leadership. Guess who the first leader was that the United States government installed in Hawaii? His name was Dole. You know, the fruit guy, that name, Dole Peaches, Dole, all that stuff. They put him in there. Why? Because most of the issues, most of the overthrows that we've done in other nations have been for the sake of our business interests, okay? You can go back into like Honduras and some of those nations down there, the banana business, or oil. We've just had business interests in all these nations. We've overthrown all these nations simply because we either wanted our businesses to prosper and they were being challenged, or we just didn't like their government, who may have been had their eyes focused in a direction that wasn't toward us. And so I guess the point so understand that. So from all the way up into Afghanistan, from Hawaii in the 1800s, and all those nations in between, we've been overthrowing governments for our own particular gain. So then consider that after the slaves were emancipated in 1864, and all of the heinous treachery that was inflicted upon black people within this nation, all those years, our nation was inflicting upon brown people, overthrowing their nations, killing their people. Same way. And so I'm not bashing America. I'm just saying, as black people, we need to realize that you're not going to get the scorpion to stop stinging you. You have to figure out how to be successful in the midst of an environment like this, man. And if you want to be successful, you got to recognize your success is not going to come from begging people to act right, trying to get them to enact programs that are going to benefit you. No, because they're going to give you just a little bit, but they're not going to give you enough. Because whether you're a black person in this nation or a brown person in one of those other nations, we're going to have issues, okay? We're going to have issues. What do we do now? Well, recognize, I saw a speech the other day. This gentleman said, actually it was from a Hindu religion, it was a Hindu speaker, and he said, I am a farmer, and my body is my field. And so recognize that. Take care of yourself. Don't lose that, but we're going to move on. But I am a farmer, and America is my field, okay? And maybe look at it, there's a particular part of your field, part of the field of America that's yours, okay? I don't want to say sharecropper. That kind of defeats the purpose of the message. But there's a part of America that's yours. And how you treat that field is how well you're going to prosper. And how well you treat your field is going to determine how much more field that is going to be at your disposal, okay? So I'm just suggesting is we have to begin to step outside of ourselves and look at ourselves and recognize from many of us that we're not in a position that we're supposed to be, that we're supposed to be in a better position, that we are doing things that are not conducive to our success in life. Drugs, alcohol, running around, having children outside of wedlock, all these things are carryovers from the persecution and the sufferings that we've had throughout our lives as black people in America. And what I'm saying is there comes a point where we have to step outside of ourselves, look at our situation, and recognize that some of these actions, some of these traits that we've been exhibiting are destroying us, destroying our community, and will ensure that our children and our descendants will not have a legacy of their own. We have to change, okay? And I think that Hindu verse was perfect about looking at your body as your field and you are the farmer. You have to stop doing things that are not conducive to good health, to good well-being. Stop spending all your money. Save money. The money that you spend on food has to be health food. Get yourself in shape, exercise, and teach your children to do the same. Begin focusing on education, recognizing that education is what's going to get your kids out of this mess. Now, as black people, I've seen a lot of stuff on social media trying, college isn't for everybody, and you find a trade. That's all well and good. But what I want to suggest is that college is for everybody. The problem is that we're not taking the right sets of courses. We're not going for the right degrees, okay? We're going for like sociology degrees or philosophy degrees or, gym degrees, all this stuff. No, don't do that. Business degrees are good. It doesn't, you're not relegated to a particular business. It teaches you how to do a business, or specialty degrees, like my brother was telling me, he was very successful. He said that when he decided to go to school back in the 70s, go to college, he went down to the library and started looking at government books and determining by what they were predicting what were going to be the fields that were going to be lucrative in the future. Where was the nation heading? What kind of fields were going to, and he decided to become a computer engineer based on his research. If you do research today, it might send you in a whole other direction, maybe agricultural, this or that. Man, there are robotics.